G'day and welcome to the Startup Retro, a weekly show where we help you level up on the Australian startup ecosystem by giving you an insider's view on Aussie startups and venture capital. I'm Will Richards.
And I'm Gemma Clancy. We're the co-founders of Overnight Success, which started as a weekly newsletter in 2022 with a mission to make the Australian startup ecosystem more transparent, accessible and connected so it can grow and thrive.
The Startup Retro podcast will expand upon the work we do at Overnight Success. At OS, we curate the most important news and announcements across the ecosystem and explain a bit of useful context behind them. So, whether you're a startup native or someone new to startups, you can keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening.
But you don't just have to take our word for it. We now have thousands of subscribers to our newsletter, including partners at Australia's leading venture capital firms, founders at the fastest growing startups, and the operators and networks that support them. And we're pretty excited to partner with the Day One Network because they've built a podcast network specifically for this audience and anyone curious about delving into the startup world. So some people might have read the newsletter over the last couple of years, but never actually met us in person or probably even heard us speak because we've been behind our keyboards and usually writing a newsletter late on a Friday night for a Saturday send. And so now we're switching to this podcast format and it's kind of like people are meeting us for the first time. So hello. And why don't we just introduce ourselves quickly, Will?
Yeah.
Why don't you kick off?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Will Richards. I work at a family office, and at that family office, my primary portfolio is working in two startups. One's the Regional Angel Investor Network, where we invest in regional-based startups at the earlier stages. And the other is Startup Speakers, where we represent entrepreneurs and innovators and help them get paid speaking opportunities. How about yourself, Gemma? What do you do?
So when I'm not working on Overnight Success, I am running a company called Stellar Startups. And Stellar Startups is focused on helping startups make sense of their marketing. And so we help them put in place strategies that actually make sense for them. Because startup marketing is actually quite different to what marketing looks like for big corporates and bigger companies that already have established flywheels and ways that they grow. We exist to help them get over that chicken and egg scenario of I need to grow to make money, but I need money to grow. And so we help them get through that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. We both work in this very early stage startup space, which I think sort of influences the content we cover. So we often focus on these really, really early stage companies that your sort of bigger mastheads don't necessarily cover because they're not big news yet, but they still potentially have massive impact down the road.
Yeah, I love the thrill of finding those startups that you think, might be the next household name, like the next Canva or the next Atlassian, because they're the ones that actually might, change the world for the better.
100%. Yeah, potentially you're already working with them. It's so exciting and you can have direct influence on them too.
The Startup Retro podcast will follow a format familiar to our readers of the weekly newsletter, but offer an opportunity for much more discussion. So we'll explain the startup relevant headlines and what they might mean for you. We'll recap the most recent startup raises to help you stay across Australia's most up-and-coming innovators and who maybe is or isn't receiving funding. And we might even have a chat about the startups that we would have or wouldn't have invested in for different reasons. Will and I love to banter offline about those kind of things, so it will be nice to bring that onto the airwaves. And we'll also cover topics that are particularly complex or spicy by bringing in guests who are part of those stories to offer their expert perspective.
So, if you want to keep your finger on the pulse of all things happening Aussie startups and venture capital, start your week by listening to the Startup Retro. New episodes every Monday, starting the 1st of July. We'll see you then.
The Startup Retro is brought to you by Day One, the podcast network for founders, operators, and investors.